Let me show you 5 tips to draw better pencil portraits. I am mattphilleo. I'm working on this 11 by 14 portrait of a relative, and it's in progress right now, and I'd just like to show you ways you can make your pencil portrait better. So let's start with tip number 1. Tip number 1 is use a palm paper. That's what I call it. A palm paper is just basically a piece of paper that you set underneath your palm when you're drawing. And it really helps a lot, because otherwise what will happen is you'll end up smearing your artwork. You'll end up getting moisture from your hand transferring into the paper and causing the paper to wrinkle or buckle. And so you want to avoid that. And the best way to do that is to just use a piece of paper or cardstock, fold it in half, and then set it underneath your palm. So that's tip number 1. Now, tip number 2 is use a dark lead for contrast. Use a dark lead for contrast. So I'm using an 8B pencil lead, and that's about the darkest you can go for graphite. A lot of stores will sell 6B, but if you can get your hands on an 8B, that's a really nice dark lead. And it's very, very useful for creating high contrast areas like glasses or pupils in the eyes. Another dark contrast area would be these little crevices next to the teeth in the mouth. You want to make sure you get them plenty dark, and areas like that. So again, 8B pencil works well. You just can't do it with your standard number 2 pencil lead. I recommend getting a pencil set if you're not sure exactly what leads you'd like, or you can get ranges of B, 2B, 8B, and maybe a 2H. 4 pencil leads should be enough. But make sure you use a nice 8B lead to get really, really dark. Okay, so that was tip number 2. Now for tip number 3. Measure proportions using paper benchmarks. So a lot of times when you're working on your portrait, you're unsure, if you have accurate proportions. You might struggle with, the distance between the eyes, making sure that they're, proportional in relation to the rest of the face, or maybe a lot of times I see with artists, they have, the facial features too large. It's very common to have the eyes too large and to fill too much of the face, or sometimes to put, like if you have glasses, to have the eyes right in the center. But in this case, they're actually more towards the top. And, there's just different things that can happen. But if you use these benchmarks, it can make a big difference. So what I like to do is look at my reference photo and just kind of get some benchmarks where, you can look, for example, at the distance between, let's say, the nasolabial fold, or we've got the eyes, and just getting the distances between the eyes and the nose and so on, and just make a couple of marks. Now it's a little difficult here because I'm holding an iPhone and this image is kind of reacting to that. But let's just say we have the distance between the eyes, and we get that measured right here, from edge to edge. And that's the distance of one edge of the eye to the other. And then we would have a benchmark, and let's say, we're going to look at that distance and compare it to the edge of the nose, the top of the nose, which would be, maybe something, like this. And you can see how that corresponds to the left side of the nose where it meets the glasses frame, okay? And we can see kind of that visual relationship on these benchmarks, and see that that edge corresponds to just a little bit left of center, all right? So then we'll want to do the same thing on our drawing, and we would just basically set this up and draw a line going across from edge to edge on both eye, and then we would have the same kind of line, all right, for the left of the nose. And just make sure you have like the same ratio. Is it a little bit left of center? Yeah, it appears to be, so that means we're on target. So you can do that all over within the face, getting these benchmarks and just kind of comparing them. I drew this freehand, but I do like to double check myself with benchmarks. Other tools people use are proportional dividers. Of course, you can grid out everything, but if you want to work freehand and really develop your skills and just double check yourself, I recommend drawing benchmarks to cross-reference between your reference photo and your drawing to make sure you've got everything accurate proportionally. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next tip, which would be tip number 4, and that's use cross-hatching for shading. Use cross-hatching for shading. Okay, so cross-hatching is a neat technique where you can basically shade. Let's just show you, an example of that. Right here I have a little bit of cross-hatching, and I'll just do a little bit on the lip here. You want to make very, very tight lines, and the tighter the lines, the better. And so if you have lines going one direction, you want to do like an exact perpendicular stroke going the other way. And you want to make sure that you do that only, if it can get dark enough. If you can get away with doing lines that just go in one direction, go with that. But if you need to double it up to get a little darker in tonal value, then using cross-hatching works better than just doing strokes all in one direction. They'll tend to get very streaky that way. If you want a really nice smooth surface, that's the way to do it. All right, so now let's take a look at our last tip, and that would be blend your pencil marks. So tip number 5, blend your pencil marks, but don't overdo. All right, so I like to use tissue paper to blend the pencil marks, and I like to do it lightly so I can still see some of the texture of the pencil. Several artists I've seen that do pencil portraits, especially in their first beginning with it, just overblend everything. And you'll see that too. Let's just imagine this is some shading they have, and they'll take it and they'll just go like this and just keep blending, and it's just overdone. And then they try to shade with what's left on the tissue. But don't do that. Instead, just use very light pressure and just kind of blend it a little bit. Just very, very light pressure. Let's blend this nasolabial fold, this laugh line. Circular motions work well too, see? And we're just lightly blending it so we can keep the detail, we can keep those value nuances in place, because part of creating realism is having shading in the right places and not making it too smooth. A lot of beginning artists I see will really make things too smooth on their gradients, and they're not accounting for all the differences in the surface and the volume of the various things they're trying to render. And we've got different areas of highlights and shadow, and we don't want to have some of our shadows too smooth. So that would be tip number 5. But anyway, I hope all this helps you, and you can use these tips in your pencil portraits to increase the realism, increase the likeness, and just have a more enjoyable process as you're working on it. So again, my name is mattphilleo, and I'm the founder of Realistic Acrylic Portrait School. You can go over there at realisticacrylic.com and check out several tips and tutorials for portrait painting. But we do also discuss pencil portraits in this channel because drawing is very, very foundational to painting. So I hope this helps. Thank you for watching this video. Like, subscribe, and I'll be happy to share more with you in the future. All right, God bless, and we'll talk to you soon.